Now that they're operating, your Anglos, your Rio Tintos, your BHPs, etc., and they're mining, what does control mean? So there's the one part of the building state capacity and a competitive business, which I don't even think you guys need to do if we're going in the direction I think we're going in. What does control mean here? Is it not owning a 51% stake in all of these companies? Or is it a matter of we will tax you to such a way that we'll get 51% of the profits? I don't know what control means.
Control means there must be local, you're correct. Control means there must be local beneficiation of all of your profits. Control means we control what you export and the quantities that you export. Control means taxing. These are forms of control.
Not ownership of the company, not a 51% stake.
So, if you read the EFF manifesto, I think it's a point I almost forgot. There's something that we call Barak's communism. So Barak's communism is authoritarian, aggressive, and enforcement of communal living and communal sort of expropriation of land and all sorts of things. So it's called Barak's communism. And it's not even developed by us, it's developed by Karl Marx himself. That we don't subscribe to the form of communism where that is authoritarian, invasive, enforces communal living, enforces control. So we're not averse to private sector participation and private sector existence in certain sectors, but we must control their environment of operating. We must control what they operate with. We must control the infrastructure they develop. And that is currently something that we don't do in South Africa. So we're saying we're going to control your patterns of exporting of our minerals. We're going to control how much profits you make. So whatever you discover in the land, we control how much of the stake of the profits that you make. We control the expenditure towards local beneficiation that you do. For example, mines in the Northwest exist within poverty-ridden communities. They're not developing them. Correct. So we'll control your profits and the beneficiation of the minerals that you find to benefit those local communities. That's what we mean by control. And this is sort of a progressive understanding of nationalization. So if you think about what I'm saying about Barak's communism, this is a form of communism that Stalin practiced. We don't subscribe to that. You are invasive, you're violent, you're authoritarian, you don't want to cooperate with private sector industries.
Joseph Stalin in the Soviet
Union. And I think he was a degeneration from Lenin's control of the Soviet of Russia. And Lenin warned about his brand of communism as well. So it's a Barak's type of communism that completely does away with the participation of the private sector, the participation of foreign direct investment. Just because we characterize it now as being unregulated, unguided, uncontrolled, doesn't mean that it must be completely done away with. If you look at China, China does what it calls a socialism with Chinese characteristics. That basically means that it allows for market participation. China is where it is today, not only because of its commitment and loyalty to Marxist ideals and to the ideas of socialism and state-guided control of the economy, but also they allow market participation. But that market participation is guided. That market participation makes certain contributions to the development of China itself. Its profits goes towards certain development of industries in China itself. So nationalization has grown beyond the regressive or old or Barak's type of definition of what we know it to be. And I think China's is a very special example as to what we are talking about in terms of what we mean by nationalization. Because if we talk about nationalization as they did it in Cuba, it won't work. You get isolated, you get economic sanctions. So you have to develop, according to the context and conditions which you live within, as China did, your own type of how you're going to implement Marxist principles and Marxist ideals, accepting that private sector interests exist, accepting that market participation and market competition exists, but ensuring that the state guides and controls all of these industries.
Cuba's not a role model for you guys.
It is a role model because they've been able to sustain themselves despite all of those aggressions and antagonisms, but I don't think it's necessary for us to go through it as well.
Okay.
We must be able to read global dynamics and how the response has been to certain implementations and practices of what we believe in. And China doesn't get a lot of attention in terms of how it's done this. Singapore as well. The state basically guides, controls, and determines everything in terms of what the private sector and the markets do. So we have to learn from the pitfalls and downfalls of what happened in Cuba, what happened in Burkina Faso, what happened in many nations that have pursued certain brands of socialism, what happened in Ghana. So there's many nations that have pursued certain brands of socialism and communism and Marxism that have failed not because they are inherently flawed, but have failed because they exist within a global ideological system that is going to suppress them and is going to isolate them. So the progression of society towards socialism is going to be very slow I would say, because we're fighting against a global system that has established itself and has developed systems to isolate and choke out anyone who tries to develop an alternative system. I saw you wanting to say you're pursuing some sort of penalism.
Yes.
I don't know how many years ago. You're going to have a very difficult time to establish any form of system when there's systems established in society
I hear you.
that are going to isolate others. So that is what we're doing. So we don't subscribe to barrack communism. We subscribe to establishing our ideals and implementing them within context that we exist in.
Your nationalization explanation sounds very complex in implementation to me, as someone who actually cares about reaching the objectives of what you're trying to achieve.
The ANC calls it a mixed economy, but theirs is much more liberal. They say they subscribe to a mixed economy. So that's national. They call it the National Democratic Revolution. So it's phases of implementing socialism, but they've gone way beyond compromises that would have been important to make as well. But it's not complex. As
an ordinary South African, I'm listening to the regulation, to the control, to the beneficiation, to the export. And in my head as an ordinary South African, I'm thinking, I think Umswati does this. I'm not sure. Why not as the state not say, if you come operate in our country, we will take 51% of your company, not because we want to disrupt operations, but we want to sit on the boards and make the decisions so that we are employing our people, so that our people are getting paid well, so that we are ensuring that whatever is being extracted is being beneficiated and that there's skills transfer. Then you don't have to worry about everything else in terms of compliance. We own 50%, we sit on your board. Any decision that we feel is focusing on profit maximization rather than the people, we then just quickly outvote it. But you can come operate here, you will make money. But we own 51% of every company, and then it's straightforward and everyone knows.
Do you think what Trump is doing with TikTok is nationalization?
Maybe explain your understanding of what Trump is doing, and then I'll answer quickly.
So he says that if TikTok wants to operate in America, the USA must have 51% of a stake in it.
Did he say 51%?
I think 50 or 51%.
Okay, I believe that's nationalization.
Do you think that's nationalization?
Yeah.
I don't think he believes that's nationalization. So do you see that it becomes really foggy? Like it's not easy to say. What we're saying as well, it's our form of nationalization that we're saying we're going to implement. Yeah. We're not saying we want to own 50% of anyone's industry, because we understand the hostility that comes with it and understand the weakness of South Africa in this global context. But Trump can say he's nationalizing TikTok without saying he's nationalizing TikTok.
He definitely is.
He's nationalizing TikTok, and he can say it without consequence. We can't say we can't make certain proclamations, certain statements, and certain things without consequence.
Is it a fear of the backlash of the wording? Because I'm Anglo.
It's a managing.
I'm Anglo. You're telling me as the EFF government, I'll own 100% of my company. I have to get a lease. I have to pay licensing, whatever. I own 100%. It's my company. But you're telling me that you'll dictate the taxes. You'll dictate what I can export and not export. You'll dictate
how much
certain labor laws
to local communities. Yeah.
But in essence, it might be the same thing.
If I tax you 25% of whatever minerals you extract of their value, 25% must go towards developing a community. If I say to you the amount of quantities you want to export, we're going to tax about 10% of them. I can get progressively to 51% without telling you that I'm taking 51% of a stake of your company. I control your decisions in terms of where you're going to locally benefit the minerals you've extracted. I control the amount of exports that you're doing because the amount of profit you make from your exports, because I'm going to tax them. So progressively, I don't really need to say to you that I'm taking 51% of the stake of your company.
But in substance, it's the same thing.
I might have done the same thing.
That's what you mean by control.
That's control.
The substance of what government will be doing in regulation.
Yeah.
Will
ultimately can be defined as nationalization.
Okay.
It can be defined. But because these multi-corporations exist in such an environment of fear, you have to explain to them the beneficiations of what we're trying to do in terms of nationalization.
Okay.
So we can't just say like Donald Trump, we want 51%. We have to find these creative mechanisms of ensuring that ultimately we've nationalized your company